All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Fast Planning Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, July 1st, 12:01 p.m. For introduction of committee members I see present today, we have with us Michael Bradley, Ken Campbell, Stephen Hope, sitting in there for Michelle Benton, Kate Duber, Brett Nelson, John Natardis, Jason Olds, Corey Richardson, Bill Rogers, Kellen Spillman, RJ Stumpley, Jacob Toyrick, and Tim Zinza. Committee members I do not see present include Alexa Green, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, and John Weinberger. But we'll announce the presence of the join us at the meeting. Faculty staff by myself, Jackson Fox, Olivia Lunsford, Corey DiRitrigliano, and Deborah Todd. And then guests in the meeting today we have William Frazier, Al Beck, Jack Barnwell, Yvette Hall, Megan Flory, and Pat Cotter. Is there anyone I missed for attendees online or in person?
And Randy Bailey.
And Randy Bailey. Thank you, Randy. Okay, let's move on to approval of the July 1st, 2026 meeting agenda. Can I get a motion on the agenda?
We make a motion to accept the agenda.
A motion made by Tim Zinza, second by Bill Rogers. Any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? All right, here none, we'll consider it approved. Takes us to the June 3rd, 2026 meeting minutes, pages 2 through 6 of the packet. Can I get a motion on the minutes? Jenny moved to approve. I'll second. Tim is the second. Any edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider those approved. That takes us to staff group and chair report, which begins on page 7 of the packet. At our last policy board meeting on June 17th, the policy board had 2 action items. The first one was related to the metropolitan plan area boundary, which has been with DOT and the governor's office since December 2023. That was kind of a routine item. We kept on the agenda until we heard an update. Did not get an update on that meeting other than it was in fact in the governor's office. So the policy board decided to make a motion to ask me to write an op-ed to the Newsminder about the lack of boundary approval at Fast Planning. Following day, the boundary did get approved, so no op-ed was written or published. And I do have the approval letter here in the packet. Second, with regard to the draft Unified Planning Work Program document, they did authorize us to release that for public comment without any further revisions. And that is open for public comment June 21st to July 24th. It will be found on Fast Planning's website. Page 8. Here is a letter that was penned in April of 2026, so a few months ago, but I did not receive this until recently. There's been quite a bit of correspondence back and forth between the DOT Commissioner's Office and the Federal Highway Administration about state versus MPO authorities, and the authorities for who gets to select which projects go into our Transportation Improvement Program or TIP document. This is kind of the final conclusion letter of that back and forth that Federal Highways has stated from the beginning and reiterate in this letter that MPOs have the sole authority to decide which projects to include in a TIP, regardless of whether those projects are regionally significant or located on the national highway system. So this provides clear direction that we have the authority to include or exclude any project that the board wishes within our TIP document. Page 10 in the packet includes the approval letter received from the governor's office, again, the day after our policy board meeting on June 17th. So this was signed and delivered to us on June 18th. approving our boundary, we began using that day for purposes of our TIP and our long range transportation plan, or MTP. Now, my last update, page 11. Just a reminder that in addition to the UPWP that is out for public comment, TIP amendment number 3 is also out for public comment during the same, so it is the same comment period. And to refresh your memory, TIP amendment number 3 adds the Airport Way Connected Corridor project, an HSIP project to the TIP, as well as the Fifth Avenue Park Access Improvements Project out in Norfolk to the TIP. And yeah, so those are both out for public comment. It is July 1st. We've not received any comments yet to date, but there's still 3 more weeks left in the comment period for both of those plans, which are available on Fast Planning's website. That concludes my staff report. Are there any questions on those items or any other items? Yes, Jenny.
I was just curious, when you got this letter from Federal Highways, was there any conversation with the state afterwards or any resolution or?
Not with myself. I've not heard of any follow-on conversations after this letter was sent. I don't know if there's been any further correspondence past this, but
Okay.
I do know this was shared with AMATS and us at the same time. That's all.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to our open public comment period. This is for any member of the public that wishes to provide testimony here today on anything not listed as an action item on the agenda. The only 2 things listed as an action item are the Fast Improvement Program project selection and our TIP administrative modification number 9. So these are both project funding related items. Any other topics that the public would like to testify on today, the floor is open at this time. Don't see any members of the public in the room, so I'm going to look to online. If there's anyone online that would like to provide testimony today, if you can figure out how to use the raise hand feature, please try that. If you cannot, just go ahead and unmute yourself. If you can begin your testimony by stating your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay, I don't see anybody online today for public testimony, so we'll close our general public comment period at this time and move on to old business. Federal fiscal year 2027 through 2028 Fast Improvement Program project selection. This begins on page 12 in your packet. It is an action item here today. I'll provide a short introduction and see if Mr. Nantardas, the manager of this program, has any additional comments before we entertain questions, public comment, and a motion. So page 12 represents the outcome of our second subcommittee meeting for the Fast Improvement Program, which was held on June 24th, so just a week ago, in identifying basically resurfacing projects for roadways and asphalt paths and sidewalk replacements for each of the entities that we have here at the table. On this here, I believe I'll speak on behalf of the whole subcommittee. I think we came to good consensus on this list. I didn't hear any, there wasn't any contention or anyone griping, really. It's everybody felt like they got a fair piece of the pie here for this program. The target was trying to get to $2 million per year for construction for 27 to 28. And, based on the delivery of these projects as far as the design effort and the amount of funding for these projects, that's why they were pushed between 27 and 28. There's a few outline projects highlighted in gray as kind of placeholders for this program, even though in both years right now we have over $2 million in projects. I can tell you one project at the bottom there, the Sheep Creek Grove Path at the lake near the West Tanana Drive intersection. That will be reconstructed as part of the Sheep Creek West Tanana roundabout project. So that can come off of this list. But there are only 3 other placeholders for the city of North Pole. Mayor Tersh decided to not move forward with Andrea Drive because apparently there's an ice lens underneath that road that keeps sinking and they keep having it filled in with gravel. And it was a gravel pavement project and that may not be a good use of our funding. He has not provided to me a replacement project to put in its place, so I'm just leaving that there at this time. And then for the Fairbanks North Star Borough, we did have the school district at our meeting, a representative of the school district at our meeting on June 24th, and there was interest in adding in the Tick Brown School driveway apron mill and pave. So this is a low cost improvement that could potentially be afforded within the program, but we don't have an estimate yet for DOT. And then the last placeholder is the North Pole transfer site road mill and pave. This is something that was presented to us by DOT and Renault and the city of North Pole as a need, but I believe it is a borough facility. And we don't know if the borough supports that project. They probably do, but they'll have to commit to pay and match. We don't know what the estimate for that work would be. This might be a more expensive project due to the length of it. But again, we're already kind of fully programmed at 2+ million in each year. These were some late additions. But my hope here today is that we get a motion out of the technical committee to advance this list with any of your adjustments here today to the policy board for approval so that John Notardis kind of has his 2 years more or less set in stone so he can begin his preliminary engineering and environmental document to capture these and proceed with design. John, do you have anything to add?
Just a little bit, the subcommittee, I think, came up with a great plan that works really well for me for the next 2 years for putting out design projects. And we actually have a scalable project in there, the Tanana Loop Rec area, gravel to pavement with a placeholder of 100,000 in the year FFY 2028. And so I have a solid next year project for 27-year project. And then I have 28 that's scalable in case we need to add or subtract some money. So it's just, I think it's set up perfectly and everyone seemed happy with what they were getting. No one felt left out, so I like it.
Great, thank you, John. All right, now it's time for questions for me and John. So not discussion or debate, but any questions that you have for either of us. Okay, hearing none, we'll open this up for public comment before we entertain a motion. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on the Fast Improvement Program project selection action item? If so, again, no one in the room here for public comment that I see, but anyone online, you can try to either raise your hand or if not, you can unmute yourself, state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony on this action item. Okay, not seeing any public testimony online. So we'll go ahead and close the comment period. And I'll now entertain a motion. Yes, Tim.
I motion to move this forward as written as a recommendation to the policy board.
Okay, is there a second? All right, John Notardis. All right, discussion. Yes, Jane.
Yeah, thanks. So as I was coming in today, I was wondering, I really like the list, but then I was wondering, and John, this is maybe a question to you. So in planning commission, sometimes things come up, and a thing came up a few weeks ago that might benefit from a little bit of traffic calming, that is, sort of an unanticipated small project. And so I was wondering if there was a way on this list, if we could have a generic, maybe under the borough list, generic traffic calming, like for speed tables or something like that, that, takes virtually no design, none of the other complicating factors that you might be able to throw in at the last minute, so that we're not trying to anticipate some of those projects a year, 2 years, 3 years in advance.
I'd say, unfortunately, we can't throw in very specifically also speed tables last minute because of our environmental process. And, if we don't have a spot covered environmentally, like looked at by the. I know it's just on the surface and stuff, but there's still a process to go through where we have to look at the, archaeology, get it, scoped in the document, make sure all the agencies and stuff know about this. It has to go through public comment, and whatnot. There's just about all of that,
Okay.
just for something even as simple as a speed table.
Okay, well, thanks.
Okay, further discussion on the debate? Yes, Council.
Just one question, trying to do the math here. These are relatively large, improvement program lists compared to what we usually do, is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, for individual projects, that's a pretty big list. Yeah.
Here's my follow-up, do we have any other, I guess, major reconstruction projects?
That's great,
would
especially with the truck
potentially-
that big. I mean, that's a lot of work to hand wash that thing.
Hey, Michael, can you mute, please?
I muted him.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought here.
Muted.
Do we have any larger construction projects that would potentially need some of that funding or could be applied to some bigger projects those couple of years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're still sitting on in 2027. Well, we were sitting on $4 million of funds that were not obligated to any project. The things that are coming up that we're gonna need big slugs of funding is Holmes Road reconstruction, Mini Street reconstruction, and Cowell Street reconstruction for First Airport. So, I don't necessarily have an anticipated year yet for each of those ones, for when the design's gonna be finished and when they're gonna go to construction. My crystal ball says all of those are probably 29 or later, but I'm not sure. So we do have funds in 27 and 28 that need to be programmed someplace. I'm pretty confident at this stage, since federal fiscal year 27 is starting soon. Like, this is a good use of our money, and there isn't another big project that has a need for this funding in 27. 28, I'd have to look a little bit harder at.
And our tip right now only goes through 27, right?
Correct. So we'll find that out with the new tip. That we'll be able to answer your question more directly once the new tip is prepared.
Would it make sense to hold off or put a disclaimer on the 28 year funds until we get the new tip and I guess get a better idea on some of these bigger projects that may need some of the funding?
Yes, I mean, that could be an amendment to the motion. Basically recommended the policy board to move forward with the 27 list and then maybe revisit the 28 list early next year. Not sure how you want to turn that into an amendment.
Yeah. I guess maybe a question.
We have done that in the past though, where we look at a couple of years, but we approve the immediate year and then the next year there's some flexibility of, hey, we're gonna revisit this before we pull the trigger on it.
And the intention, John, correct me if I'm wrong, would be to design all these projects in one slug?
It would be two different designs, two different environmental documents. The intention behind how we split it up was the easier ones are serious projects, so I could get through the environmental document faster. The more difficult ones are in the 28 column. And so I kind of need a good idea of what I can start on with the parent design project now, so that I have 2 years to get that document done. So I want to start on both of them now. Then put them out in different years.
Okay, let me think about it some more, but that's kind of where my thought process is like, we've been working on Cowles for 15 years now. That's kind of the holdup of, just a little bit more money. Maybe it makes more sense to wait on the 28 program till the new tip comes out. We have new estimates on Cowles Street, et cetera. But I'd have to think more, at least right now, I'm not prepared to make an amendment.
Okay. And of course, there will be an opportunity once we see the tip to make adjustments at that time. But it would be good to provide John some marching orders basically right now. And things can change.
It's a whole lot easier to remove stuff than to add it, so if I can somehow move forward with starting preliminary engineering work on some of this stuff, that would be nice. And, the possibility of revisiting it and moving it later, I guess. But adding to it is the problem.
All right, further discussion, debate on the motion. Last call, further discussion, debate.
I'll
Yes,
make an
Cal.
amendment.
Okay,
So I'm gonna move to amend the motion to add a note that projects could be removed from the fiscal year 28 list when the new tip comes out, if other larger projects have a funding need.
okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Cheryl said.
Jenny, that's a second.
And I'm open to wording changes. That was the best I could kind of do here on the fly. But I think back to what I was saying, like some of these projects in the tip we've been working on for so long and they're so important for the community, Powell's, Homes. That if it's just a little bit of funding to get it to the finish line, I would rather wait a year or two on some of these smaller projects to get those like bigger community impact projects to the finish line.
Discussion, debate on this amendment. Yes, John?
There's a couple particular, sorry, it's a good amendment, but there's a couple particular projects for the city of Fairbanks where we're coordinating for them to do some work before we come in and finish up that work, and we would not want to remove a few of these projects, like, so if there's a way to amend the amendments and not remove whichever ones Tim would recommend not removing, that might be something we want to add. Does that make sense? Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want the possibility of what happened with this year's project to happen again, where were coming through with the utilities and then we were unable to finish the pavement.
At least I would trust the experts in that situation. I trust, you and the city engineer to be able to make those calls.
Okay, yeah, if that's a given, then we don't have to amend your amendment.
I think that's a given.
Okay.
If you do have discretion within the program,
Okay,
and obviously would report back to the technical committee, maybe the month.
sounds good to me
You're
then.
comfortable. All right, further discussion, debate on the amendment. Okay, I'll do roll call on the amendment. For the record, John Weinberger has joined us, so that will be part of the roll call as well. So we're gonna start with, Kellen,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Corey Richardson, okay, I'll come back to Corey, Jason Olds,
Yes.
John Tartas,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Stephen, Hoke,
Yes.
Jenny,
Yes.
Michael Bradley,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
John Weinberger,
Abstain.
Jacob,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
and just revisiting Corey Richardson. Okay, he may have stepped away. Is there anyone on roll call I missed? Okay. That amendment passes. We're back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion as amended or any further amendments? And just so everybody's clear, the Sheep Creek Road path of the lake is going to be deleted from this. So it will not go forward as presented. That one will come up, but everything else will stay as is. Okay. So further discussion, debate on the motion as amended. Okay, hearing none. I think the only thing that required some debate was that amendment and that passed, so I'm just gonna ask if there's any objection to the motion as amended by technical committee members. Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none opposed, we'll consider the motion as amended approved and move on to new business, item 8A. The federal fiscal year 2023 through 2027 Transportation Improvement Program and Administrative Modification number 9, which begins on page 15 in the packet. So to provide you an introduction to this for background, this is actually related to our federal fiscal year 2026 federal funding obligations, which is the next item on the agenda. But Randy Bailey with DOT planning was able to round up all of the DOT project managers working on the projects on the tip for any last minute adjustments before the end of this federal fiscal year. So last minute adjustments, they have to be approved by the end of July. So this is our one opportunity. So I did visit with John Atardis on his projects, Ethan Greats on his projects, and then Yvette Hall did send me a list of all her adjustments via email. Those are the 3 primary project managers that work on the bulk of the projects in our tip. And so based on all of their revision requests for this kind of final revision for the tip before the federal fiscal year end, this is what they came up with. And I do intend to advance this to the policy board on July 15th for their approval. Takes about a week after that to get it incorporated into the STIP. But this should button up our obligations for the year. There, you'll see some of these funding changes are moving a 26 obligation up to 27 because they're not going to make the schedule. But I'll run through each one of these real briefly with you. For the Chena Riverwalk project, the environmental document has to be reevaluated. I think it's timed out due to the number of years of last time it was approved. And that needs to be re-signed before they can move forward with that right-of-way phase. So it's a delay on that side, not on the railroad side in any way, shape, or form. But they want to move the right-of-way phase from 26 out to 27. And then for committed measures for the Fairbanks State Implementation Plan, the construction cost for the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center, the new estimate increased from $510,000 up to $735,000. However, the utility phase for that project was not needed, so that drops it by $80,000. All in all, it's only about $100,000 increase or $150,000 increase for that project. We deleted a placeholder, utilities phase placeholder for the Chena Lake Recreation Area Bike and Pedestrian Access via Black Road project, since it was not needed. For the Fast ADA Improvements Program, I don't have all the specific projects listed here, but it was basically a last minute shuffle of things that were ready to get out to bid this year in 26 and things that weren't ready that will go out to bid in 2027. So and then a slight construction increase based on the latest estimates from DOT. For the Fast Improvement Program, based on the technical committee's motion made on May 6th, we updated the $2 million per year investment for 27 and 28 in the TIP, as well as added $400,000 of additional design funding for that program in 2027. Now, for everybody's purposes, I guess, in looking at the TIP, 2027 and 2028 are informational years. It's not part of the first 4-year fiscally constrained amount. So it is just information. It looks like big increases there that would trigger an amendment, but would just be reflected in informational columns. So that's shown to set us up for success with the new TIP that will come out this fall. Parks Highway Sheep Peak Extension, traffic signal, so your word got cut off there. The construction phase is increased from 9.5 million up to 10.2 million based on DOT's latest estimate. Pioneer Park, or parking lot and boat launch, John Vitardis revisited his, design estimate for that project. It needs an additional 25,000 for it, so that has been added. And then, for the Sheep Creek Road Extension Shared Use Path, based on the latest estimate, the price actually was reduced from 650,000 down to 350,000. And then underneath the statewide pavement and bridge preservation program, the Parks Highway Milepost 355 resurfacing, that estimate went up $500,000 from 2.8 million. up to
Hundreds and,
3.9. And then on Yankovich Millerville Road, last week I did receive a change order request, from DOT, out on Yankovich. There was a number of things that came up here over the summer. I'll just kind of run through them with you briefly here. So there's some additional construction surveying, as DOT updated the typical, plan sheets to provide smoother roadway transitions. They did encounter some soft spots in the road, that require some additional work and additional fill. And then this is one that I think we may see more of here, but due to the inflation of fuel costs, the contractor requested some additional compensation there. So, because when they bid on the project, fuel prices were much lower than are here today. We're seeing that reflected in the current bid prices. But this project was bid last year and it started construction last year. And so fast forward to the following summer, fuel prices are much higher and they requested that they be compensated for that additional fuel cost. So all in all, $232,000 change order. We have sufficient offset funds to cover it, so it doesn't affect any other project in the TIP, by affording that, increase. And then behind that is just all the changes I explained, with all the financial detail. So if there's any question about any individual, change to the TIP, we can go to that page and take a look at it. So I'll open up the floor now for any questions that you may have on this administrative modification. Yes, Kellen.
Just one question, maybe I'm jumping ahead. With these changes, we expect to fully obligate all of our funds by the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, we're on track to be fully obligated. That is the very next agenda item, so we'll dive into that a little bit more, but.
Okay.
That's why we did the rounds with all the project managers to make sure these obligations were already turned in or going to be turned in when. And we have our checklist and things to check on before the end of this month to make sure that that all happens. What happens on federal highway side, we don't know yet, but we'll talk about that the next agenda.
Okay, thanks.
This is just a big cleanup to hopefully set us up for success. So we obligate 100% of our funds. All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, this is an action item, so I'm gonna open this up for public comment at this time. Is there any public comment on this item today? Again, none in the room. Anyone online, if you'd like to testify on this administrative modification? Meet yourself, state your name for the record, and proceed as you're talking about. Okay, not seeing any comment online, so at this time, we will entertain the motion. Yes, Tim.
I'd like to make a motion to move it forward as written.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second? Second by Brett. All right, discussion. Go home and enjoy the sun outside or something. All right, I'll call a question then. Is there anyone opposed to the motion to recommend the policy board to approve tip administrative modification number 9 as presented. Anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll consider it approved. And move on to item 8B, federal fiscal year 2026 federal funding obligations at page 41 to 45 in the packet. This is not an action item. This is an open discussion item. So I'll provide a brief introduction and then we can discuss it. So as shown at the top of page 41, the federal fiscal year 2026 obligations are only at 25% this year. And I feel like I've been mentioning that every meeting for the past 3 or 4 meetings that I'm concerned about this number. Still am concerned about this number. But this is an updated report. I got the latest obligation status on June 29th, so Monday. DOT sent me a brand new report, so this is 2 days old. And you can see there's still a lot of blanks here for obligations being turned in, and that's why we went through the exercise to meet with each of the DOT project managers working on all of these to ensure that they have either turned in the obligation paperwork to DOT project control and it's in the works, or they plan to for this month. It really is their deadline to try to get these in by the end of July. Understanding the federal fiscal year ends September 30th, but they need to get them in by the end of July, so project control will get them processed in order over federal highways in August and provide federal highways enough time to approve these obligations. Now this reflects TIP administrative modification number 8, our most recent one, does not reflect 9, which you just recommended for approval. But based on those discussions, some of these came off the list and were pushed out to 27. Others, prices were adjusted for some of these obligations. But what I want to show you before we get into the discussion here is page 45. So I looked back at our obligation reports going back all the way to 2018. And I have the federal fiscal year, I have the report date. So we're looking at basically the end of June, maybe the beginning of July, and what percent obligated we were in each one of those years. So I would expect at the end of June to be about 75% obligated, which was consistent in 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. But I know the last couple of years, this has been happening to us, that our obligations have not been keeping up. So in 24, we saw a drop, and then 25, we saw a drop. In 26, this is the lowest ever for obligations. One thing I'll say is that some of these obligations, like for example, for the Fast Improvement Program, which is not yet out to bid, right, John? But hopes to be soon.
I signed the certification paperwork today to get ATA
Yep.
for phase 4.
So
And
we
then
have
there's a bunch of signatures I have to get on there.
We've got $3.7 million available for that project to go out to construction. So like, if that hits in July, then our obligations like bump up to 50%. I mean, so there's some big slugs here with things going out to bid late that will soak up these obligations. So, but this is kind of a pattern that I saw last summer, and I think even the summer before, so in 24 and 25, that some of these projects are getting off schedule to where they're not going out to bid in the spring and they're going out to bid in the fall. So there's a late construction obligation and they're bid at a different time of the year. So it's like this shift in when the bids are going out, where the majority of our funding is not obligated earlier in the year. So I think that kind of explains the last 3 years and why we're here today with this. I do know that obligations as well over at federal highways are really slow. Like they're taking a couple months for an obligation to get approved because they used to have 18 staff members and now they have 4. And they are relying on outside other state federal highway division offices to assist them with their work. So there are delays on the federal side that we're seeing as well this year as a result of the reduction in force of the federal government. But DOT is processing everything that they can and everything that comes through project control and getting it down to them. So I don't see a delay in DOT project control with any of this. But there's definitely a delay in the federal side, and then we're again seeing a shift in when our projects are going out to bid. And so I think that's what explains it, but you know, again, we've worked really hard on to Adam Mod 9 to move out anything that we knew wouldn't be obligated this year, and we have assurances from the project managers, everything that's now on the books and the tip will get obligated, or at least the obligation will be turned into federal highways. And that's all I can say. If federal highways doesn't obligate funds by the end of the federal fiscal year, even though if they have them, the hope is that those funds can be carried forward to the next year. That's never a guarantee. Last year, we only didn't obligate 500,000. And that was allowed to be carried forward from 25 and 26. So there is a precedent there that when that situation happens, it will be honored, and it was last year. But that's never a guarantee. We used to call this banking. Something didn't happen, we bank it to the next year. That's not an official term, like in federal regulation or anything. It's definitely at the discretion of federal highways. And the carry forward funding is a real thing, but it's not for all fund categories. But it is for most fund categories that are moved. So I guess I'll stop there. I'm not sure I'm making anybody feel any better, but I'm explaining what I know, and we've been working on this issue.
I'll add, my belief is that prior to 2018, going back even, 2010, 11, 12, 13, that the numbers were probably not that 75% range. They're probably a little bit lower because Northern Region really worked on shifting things, getting things obligated much earlier. And so I know because when I was in environmental, we used to get a whole slug this time of year to try to beat the cutoff. There'd be a lot of stuff last minute. Northern Region really worked hard to get things earlier, much earlier. So I think these numbers now are slipping back to what they had been. So it's gonna take some work for the state and for the region to change those back. But it is, yeah, it's not what had been happening, those numbers, but if you went back another 6 or 8 years, it probably would be more numbers. Yeah, so it is changeable.
Yeah, okay.
But
That's good information, yeah.
it is hard to see, because the calendar is getting close to when the cutoff is for obligations. And I think the other regions obligate things later. We're the region that really worked on getting things earlier, so.
Yeah. All right, well, that's helpful. We're not pointing fingers here either, so it's just a discussion. This is not all John's fault.
Well, I didn't say that.
Thank you.
No, we'll just give them, complicated projects. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess maybe a little background. I got kind of upset last year when I think it was the improvement program that didn't obligate. And at least even back to my time when I worked for Fast Planning and like 2010 to 2012, like our number one job was, and I'd say our most important job was to make sure all the federal funds were obligated by the end of the federal year. We watch these things like hawks, and I think that's honestly one of our main jobs as a technical committee, that when these come up and something can't obligate, we have a plan B or a plan C with the funding. I still think that's one of the most important things we do. So I get nervous when I see the obligations in the fall because that deadline comes up, right? And if I remember correctly, it's like August 1st, you need to get everything into project control to get it obligated by October 1st. So like we're a month away from that. And that concerns me. Like, I guess I don't care if everything goes out to bid in the fall, but I do care if things aren't obligated by the fiscal year and we have to give money back. That's kind of a big deal with how many transportation needs we have. So is there a way, or is there an intention to try to shift this back to spring obligations?
I can't answer that. I mean, the projects are being managed by DOT staff, but it's been a lot of challenges.
Oh, yeah, if you want an answer to that, the we can shift it, we just have to shift like everything and do a hard reset. Add a year to every project almost, if we really wanna do a full on. Shift of getting back to obligating things at a certain time of year when you think is best. But you know what I mean? Like if you don't want to fall obligation or whatever you call this, end of summer. Then you have to add 6 months to the project, move it to the next year. Like do a comprehensive review of everything and do it for everything. Otherwise, we're just trying to get the stuff out.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, Northern Region did that a long time ago.
I was saying for big projects.
I have a question for John. John, that 2-year plan we were discussing previously to push stuff out, like, what would that help with the obligation? I mean, that
Yeah.
seems to be like what that was the intent.
That was the intent behind that, correct? We just skipped, we intentionally skipped a year and stopped trying to put out the fast improvement program in 1 year. Yes, so, there is a step forward to doing that. That we just made happen today, yeah. And then me knowing what's in the 28 project is another step towards early obligation, because I can work on that soon.
And again, this obligation report that's in your packet, I mean, it just shows you what federal highways obligated. Like, it's done, the money is obligated. This report doesn't show you what DOT has turned in. So we could potentially modify this report to flag the ones that are pending that have been turned in. I mean, that might be a better way to look at this because the picture might look a little better, but.
Is that the biggest backlog right now, is just federal highways processing them?
No, what I'm saying is that it's a combination of the delays at federal highways and our projects slipping a spring bid out to a fall bid. So we're again, the construction phase is 80% of the project cost. So if 80% of our projects were obligated in March, we'd be at 75%. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, John, I got a question for you, John. So bidding wise, bidding something in the fall versus bidding something in the spring, what's that dynamic as far as competition and prices among local contractors? Is there anything you can?
You wanna bid in the fall so that they can go through winter and procure the items they need for construction the next summer, as early as you can bid. If you do bid in the spring, it might be a good idea to plan for not that summer's work, but the following summer, so that could help as well. But the more advanced notice that the contractors have, the cheaper the bids might be. Because they know what work they're doing this year.
Yep.
Most of the time, but like further out, they're trying to fill their schedule up, and
For the
so
next
you'll
fall,
get better bids usually.
Well, that's a good takeaway. I didn't know how that looks on paper or what that, so that does make a lot of sense to me. Yeah, John.
And your bid packages, sorry, I'm not very familiar with those, specify the start date, the completion of the project.
They generally specify the end date or the completion date for a contract, but we can put provisions into a contract for delayed start if we wish to.
So
And
you,
I've done that before.
in your example of bidding in the spring, having a long completion date,
Mhm.
that would allow the contractor to choose or to span both construction seasons.
Yeah, they could do that. I mean, the more options a contractor has, the cheaper the price is. But if you want to specify a year, you can. Want it to be 2 years, we can specify that that. It's just the more specific you get, the more expensive it'll be.
Yeah, it matters a lot with the types of projects too, the more rural ones where they have to. Crush material, it's nice to advertise, late summer so that they can, award in the fall and they can even mobilize crush material and. And do vegetation clearing in the fall, so they don't have nesting window in spring. So it kind of matters on the type of project. In town here, most of it's commercial material gravel sources, so you don't have to work on material sites. So there's more flexibility, but usually contractors by the time. February, March, April comes up, they already have their summer work lined up and their crews and stuff mobilized or staged for where they wanna go. So if they bid on something, they might not be hungry, so your bid prices might be lower. But then they're just stacking it for the next fall, next summer. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things that go on. And then the contractors that get stuff in town, often they're working out remotely too. So then depending on the size of the project in town, it might just be filler, a filler project to pick up the end of the season or, a bigger one like ours would be, that's a major one, it's gonna take a couple of seasons. So, then that affects what other stuff that they don't bid on.
You're also removing some risk if you get more time. So they're gonna put a price to risk if you have a condensed time frame of when stuff needs to be done. So if you give them some extra time, it brings the prices down quite a bit.
So I guess at this point, I'm gonna leave this on the agenda for our next technical committee meeting. I'll probably list it as an action item at our next meeting. So at our next meeting, I'll not only represent the obligation report, but I'll update that to include all the obligation requests that have been turned in. And then I'll highlight anything that didn't get turned in. But right now I have assurances that everything's gonna get turned in. But if one or two things gets left out for one reason or another, we can deal with those at the time, and it might be in the form of a banking request like we've done before to like, okay, we're gonna miss those 2-3 obligations and you need to put in an official letter to request that those funds are held for 27 afterward. So that would be my plan. Ready? Yeah, John.
We're just discussing this, right?
Yes.
So fast. The NFH for DY 1088 shows up over in the CMAC and.
Yep.
The SIP bonds for 3,091,700. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, we added an 800,000 CMAC for you on that one. We ran out of STP funds
Gotcha.
for the non-motorized locations. Okay. Let's move on to item 8B, federal, 8C. The proposed PM 2.5 non-attainment area split, which begins on page 46 in your packet. I put this on your agenda as an informational items to kind of begin our discussion on this, and I'm going to invite Jason Olds to speak to it. But just want to note that I do not believe this is out yet for public comment officially. So today's a day to kind of hear about it and start thinking about it. And then when it's out for public comment, we may or may not choose to write a comment letter. But based on everything that I've learned from DEC and my history with air quality is that I really think the benefits of doing this far outweigh the cons. And we'll kind of discuss that here today. But anyways, I think this is a good thing for us, but we all need to learn about it and make sure that that's what we all think. And again, if we want to offer a comment via fast planning to the state during the public comment period, we have that ability to do it. But Jason, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the proposed split.
Sure. And thanks for that intro. I think that's kind of the way we view it. The benefits outweigh some of the cons, but essentially what we're talking about is right now with the sort of air quality non-attainment area, it's one regulatory area with three different zones being Goldstream, Fairbanks, and North Pole. And if you don't know about the Goldstream area, it's because they never get alerts because it's sort of elevated and the original boundaries were drawn on some existing boundaries. But essentially, where Fairbanks has been demonstrating attainment for the last several years, North Pole still has a little bit of improvements to make to reach attainment with those air quality standards. And so the basic idea is that we would split the boundary. We have the monitoring data to support it via some monitoring we've done at A Street for a number of years now. And essentially, we can make the case that they're two distinct areas. Splitting isn't really something that's very common, especially where you still have part of an area that's in non-attainment. And we've got a number of years, just two really left until the current plan in effect runs its course that we're forecasting attainment for North Pole. If they fail to meet that, which it appears is likely the case, then we would go into another non-attainment planning phase for North Pole exclusively with the split. And with those planning phases can come additional regulations and requirements and really what we call sort of the SIP clock, which led to the conformity freeze that was just lifted. And so for the purposes of FAST, I think what's important for everybody to know is that we're mitigating the potential for a future freeze or future regulations and complications in sort of the Fairbanks and Goldstream areas right now. Those would not be subject to sort of the future planning, future restrictions, future SIP clock freeze, sanctions, et cetera, as Fairbanks would eventually, and there's some regulatory administrative process until we get here, but eventually Fairbanks would be in a maintenance area status, which is still, at least according to a quick read on the regulations, eligible for CMAQ funding. But when we talked with the folks at EPA last week, they weren't quite sure on how everything shakes out in terms of process, given some relative unprecedented nature of doing this. But there are benefits to the community. If you think of sort of the sources and everything, it's saying that any new regulations need not apply in Fairbanks as they have been able to reach attainment with those in place. And so it's about minimizing risks of eventual burdens or sort of the business community and power plants that are in the Fairbanks area could escape those future sort of planning phases. Obviously, if it's North Pole, you know, we would like them to be in attainment and not face that, but it sort of minimizes and mitigates some of the risks of future planning cycles. And so there are some winners and losers in this, but the benefits, I think, outweigh the risks there. You know, when it comes to emission budgets and what we do for part of the SIP planning that we share with FAST, the process isn't exactly shook out. We imagine it's some of the same work, just splitting those tables, as we'll still have maintenance area plans and then limited maintenance area plans for Fairbanks. And so as we roll forward in the future, there may be some splitting of data that we do through typically our contractors developing those budgets. And then really just that future conformity freeze limitation to the North Pole area exclusively would be the bigger benefit. So any questions or anything on that?
See any in the room at this time? Anybody online? Yeah, Kellen, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, yeah, we'll do Kellen first and then Stephen Hope. We'll get you second.
Jason, just, I've not been involved in this. How did you decide to break where you did between the Fairbanks and North Pole areas?
Some of it's, again, some existing boundaries with sort of the zones that are called that I couldn't tell you all of the details, exactly where things were drawn and when. When we start talking about sort of that Badger Road area, actually Steve Hope might know some of the history with that. But we've been monitoring at sort of a maximum impact site in Fairbanks while we've maintained sort of our other monitors to show sort of that there are distinct behaviors and activity. The theory is that the air shed collectively tends to, that air tends to move downriver, which is true to a certain extent. But we did have to show as part of this that the impacts are really minimal. There seems to be some independence to how those air movements occur, where those emissions generating in North Pole are somewhat distinct. And so taking again some of those boundaries and everything without truly answering your question, because I'd have to dig for the full history. That's sort of where the boundaries lie.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so I can
Go ahead.
clarify a little further. So with that boundary, when they were designating the North Pole area and separating it from the Fairbanks area, they used a combination of roadways, including Badger Road, and then up through using the boundary against Fort Wainwright. The EPA loves existing boundaries when it comes to designations and drawing lines, so roads were used. We had to clarify that a bit more for the request to split, breaking it down into it's a similar verbiage that we used in the original, just outlying areas for the boundary as a whole. And that's kind of where that came from, Kellen. Mostly what I wanted to say on this is just kind of reiterate what Jason had said. Overall, this seems to be the best path forward, I think, for the area, in the sense that we separate out the utilities, which affect the entire area, and give Fairbanks its chance to kind of not pull away, but get into attainment and protect the entire area from further burdens put on the utilities that could are going to affect the entire area, to where North Pole, if it doesn't hit attainment by the attainment date, either way, these future possible sanctions or whatever comes are going to affect North Pole either way, whether or not we separate from Fairbanks. And if we can separate out Fairbanks and protect the greater area from some of these burdens, I think that's the best path forward for the entire area. So
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the one thing I'll point out, Jason mentioned this briefly there, but we have a pot of CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation air quality funding, that can only be spent in a PM 2.5 non-attainment area. And what it amounts to is 25% of the CMAQ funding that comes to the state of Alaska. So that's by regulation in the transportation bill, that of all the CMAQ money that comes to the state of Alaska, 25% has to be spent in a non-attainment area. So right now we're spending that across Fairbanks and North Pole. Underneath this proposal, at some point in the future, if the EPA approves the split, based on my read of the regulations, being a non-attainment area, not a maintenance area, but a non-attainment area, we'd have to focus that investment in the North Pole area. Which again is like not a bad thing. So a little bit less money to the Fairbanks area, but I know the North Pole area is the fastest growing. And I'm sure there's some paths, sidewalks, things like that that need to be installed out there, but we really got to focus on planning out those priorities.
And Jackson, I will say I did read that as non-attainment maintenance area as well. I don't know if they have different proportionalities, but we might want to double check that or ask for clarity in comment letter.
Wonderful. I'll verify that. Thank you, Jason.
But in theory, there is a point once we start the split that even if it's non-attainment maintenance areas, eventually Fairbanks would likely be released before North Pole. So your statement is still true in the sense that somewhere 20, 30 years from now, those funds would only be eligible in North Pole.
Yep. Well, that's good. That's why we're just kind of getting an introduction to this here today. We will all learn about this. And once it's out for public comment, then we'll be better prepared to write comments, or maybe it's a letter of support. Not sure what that's going to look like right yet, but this will come back up on the technical agenda when it's out for public comment.
And I would say any questions on that CMAQ funding or emission budgets, if there's any clarity that you think we need, those are both good comments to ask. All righty.
All right, thank you, Jason. Okay, we'll move on to our last agenda item. Begin on page 49. This is the new draft TIP policy and procedure. I had intended to have this finished here today for everybody to present you my final draft, but I haven't finished the last section of this yet. And even this morning, I was wrapping up the new TIP template. In a moment here, I will actually have Olivia pull up the TIP template. I have it in a separate PDF in there. But for right now, I'm gonna just kind of show you what I've been working on over the past, actually couple months here to try to get this right. So at Fast Planning, we do have an approved policy and procedure for development of our TIP document, which is our 4-year funding plan for all of our projects. I think the last time it was updated was around 2015, so it's 10 years old. And in my read of the policy and procedure, it's not comprehensive to if someone came to my job new or a technical committee member wanted to read about how is this thing developed from start to finish and how does this relate to our MTP and the STIP and all the stuff. I kind of wanted to start to finish, write a more inclusive policy and procedure so that everybody understands what happens behind the scenes in developing this. And all the submittals and approvals and, the public involvement procedures, et cetera, for it. So rather than trying to revise the current policy and procedure, I just started writing a brand new one. This is something that I hope to sit down with, in particular, Randy Bailey and Don Galligan at the borough to kind of go through this and see where they think that it could be strengthened. Tomorrow afternoon, I should have this finished and I'm going to send it out down to AMATs and MVP. So the other 2 MPOs in the state, their directors, to take a look at it. Because I know Matsu is working on their own TIP policy and procedure. Ours are going to look somewhat similar, but there's definitely some differences in procedure that they're moving forward with down there compared to how we do things. Sometimes we might overcomplicate things and maybe the processes should be simpler, but I'm just going to I'm not going to go through this page by page of what I've written so far. We'll do that next month when I bring it before you for a recommendation policy or replacing our current policy with the new one. After I've kind of vetted it with all the folks that I just discussed here, but really, as you walk through this document, it's these items 1 through 15 on pages 49 and 50 that I put a lot of importance into providing paragraphs and tables describing all of these relationships and responsibilities. But yeah, first one is just explaining the simple relationship between our staff work plan, our UPWP, our long range plan, our MPP, and our TIP, which is our 4-year funding plan, and our public participation plan. And then describing that relationship between our TIP document and the state's TIP, which is the STIP, and how that incorporation process works and who gets to approve what. Making more explicit statements that our TIP must be linked to our federally required performance measures and targets. And I have a whole section on project scoring criteria, how those categories for performance measures will be higher weighted than other categories. Providing a definition for regionally significant project. That's currently not in our policy and procedure. We have it within our TIP document, but it's more appropriately put into our policy and procedure because our definition is unique to our MPO. There is a base definition in federal regulation for a regionally significant project, and then you can add to it to make it specific to your area, which we have done in the past, but it needs to be formalized in this policy and procedure. Outlining a new process for illustrative projects. So these are projects that get nominated to us. They score really high, but we just don't have enough money to fund them because of either the project cost or we have too many projects to fund. Federal Highways is pretty clear. They do not want to see these projects in our TIP table because there's no federal money on them yet. They need to be shown in the narrative or some other location in the larger TIP document. So those have been moved out, but I do describe a procedure for how to handle illustrative projects. And to keep that list small, so you're not setting up unreal expectations with policy board members of the technical committee that, 12 projects are all gonna get money in the next 4 years. That's not necessarily true. So talking about that. Other required project information, there's certain things, and I'll show you in the tip table that we don't have currently. That I've put together a whole new template for our tip to pull this information out, but our current tip really doesn't have a good way of showing total project cost. It shows the amount of funding that we're gonna spend over the next 4 or 5 years, but it doesn't capture how much we spent before this tip was developed in the last tip. So like when you have projects like Old Steve Street construction, or you have Yankovich, or you have Cowell Street, we are required to have that full cost history so that the public and our policy board knows, like from start to finish. This started in, 2010, it's now 2026. And we have spent $32 million on this project, and it took us 16 years to get it to construction. It's that type of information that the tip needs to display so that everybody understands what is happening with these projects, how much they actually cost, not just those 4 years that you have in the tip. Also, another thing that we learned here recently that's cropped up over the last year, especially with the conformity freeze, is that we need to have an air quality status for each of our projects. Some are clearly exempt and don't need to go through project level conformity. Some are non-exempt and do have to go through project level conformity. And this is an additional step beyond our conformity determination for our plans, our MTP and our tip. And some are to be determined that we need to schedule an interagency consultation meeting to go over that project to make a determination whether it is exempt or non-exempt, and then what the procedures are for allowing that project to advance. So having that category there, my favorite, I'm gonna put the DOT project manager's name on each project, so if the public is looking at the tip and they wanna like, why isn't Holmes Road moving forward? I gotta find John Tardis. So,
Go for it, that's good public outreach.
yep.
Pretty good.
So, having that type of, so these are things, that are not listed. The other thing is the match funding in our tip. We just show it as state match or third party match, but really we should be showing who's paying that match. It should be shown as City of Fairbanks or City of North Pole or Borough or UAF or, state DOT. But to call that out directly so that, when an assembly member or city council member is looking at this, like, or the city engineer is looking at this, like, okay, I know how much match I need for this project, but then there's a whole match table that shows like the City of Fairbanks in 27 needs this much match money, in 28 needs this much match money, in 29 needs this much match money, and so on. And then a total like, okay, Tim, you need to put away $1.2 million in match to cover your projects over the next 5 years. And so you set up a match reserve account at the city and ask for capital funds to slowly build that so that you know that you're covered over the next 5 years. So it's a tool, for a lot of people to use, not just me. I'm reorganizing the tip. It's currently split in 6 different tables. The 6 tables are projects funded with MPO sub-allocations, projects funded with statewide apportionments, air quality programs, discretionary grants, FTA projects, and our air quality table. And it's confusing even for DOT staff to find the project they're looking for. So I'm making 2 tables. One is for all projects with federal highway funds, and the other one is for all projects with Federal Transit Administration funds. So the railroad and Max Transit will have their own table, and every other project we fund all goes into a singular table in alphabetical order, regardless if it's a sub-allocation of FAST or a statewide apportionment that, or an HSIP project. But it's all there in one table. There's no more supplemental tables, so that it's just a singular source of information. And DOT has asked us to begin issuing our own need IDs for projects in our boundary. They don't want us to continue to use the state system. So I've put in the policy procedure, what that numbering schema will be. I already talked about the fund codes for match. Those are going to be spelled out rather than just saying that they're third party. Next one is use of advanced construction funding. We use advanced construction funding to accelerate project delivery from time to time as needed, or if we run out of enough money in the current year, we borrow from the future year. Now, my unwritten rule is that I try not to borrow more than 50% of any fund category in 1 year to pay for a current year project. Like that's my threshold for myself. And that when we borrow it from that future year, it's paid back that same year that we borrowed it from. There are no real rules around this at Federal Highways. You can borrow 100% of all your funds from the next year, but then you don't have a program next year. You can pay them back in 2 or 3 years instead of the very next year. But I think that we should, as an MPO, have a policy and procedure for ourselves that will try not to, like this, just write it down. Try not to go past 50%. We're gonna pay it back in the year that we borrowed it from. I mean, of course, there can be exceptions to policies, but something to strive for there. And then with TIP amendments and administrative modifications, TIP amendments are a lot of work. And they take up to 90 days to complete. I'd like to do one per year, and that's it. And I'd like to schedule that at the very beginning of each federal fiscal year. So I will, start building things up over the year, and then come September, October, I'll put something before the technical committee and policy board that eventually may get approved by December. And I'll still do administrative modifications on an as-needed basis. I know that there'll be multiple of those per year, but for TIP amendments, I'd like to just do one per year. So this is like setting up an expectation with our DOT project managers that you have this one opportunity per year. Now, there might be some unforeseen circumstance that comes up, like, hey, we really need to, we've got to get this met the threshold for amendment. We got to do a midsummer. And we'll make that determination at the time whether or not to move forward, but just to kind of have it scheduled so that DOT project managers know that there's kind of a time frame on when we want to do that. Also, so next page. This next page here is kind of more expectations for DOT. It's kind of weird for an MPO to write a policy and procedure for themselves that affects DOT, but I want to put it in the policy and procedure, and this is the section that I haven't written yet, which I should finish here today or tomorrow. But it's defining expectations for DOT to provide us their projected revenue summary for all of our fund categories prior to the beginning of each federal fiscal year. That's something that had happened in the past years ago, but it's not been happening the last few years. And so just an expectation that like by July or August every year, someone at DOT sends us our revenue projections for the next year, so that we already have numbers in there in place, but there's a lot of adjustments that occur, and we always rely on our numbers from DOT to insert into TIP. Also, an expectation for DOT staff to update all the project estimates once per year, and have that to me before the beginning of each federal fiscal year. So, because we're often caught off guard when in the TIP, the numbers I put in were from a 2019 estimate, and it's going to construction this year. And so like 3 months before it's supposed to go out to bid, it's like, oh, by the way, 6 years later, the price is now this, and the design's finished, of course. So just kind of, again, an expectation, project managers, please dust off your estimates once per year and send me what those revisions are so that I can capture them in the amendment that will be, in September, October, right after I receive all these. Also for DOT to make timely notifications of any scope changes from project start so that we can ensure it's still consistent with the project that was nominated to the TIP and scored. Make sure that what's getting built is what was nominated to us and scored so highly, and things are not being left out. But also to make sure that the scope of that project is still consistent with our long range plan, or MTP. If you change the scope significantly enough, it could trigger an amendment to our long range plan. Or, well, what it really does is trigger a conversation with the technical committee and policy board, like, hey, the scope has changed beyond what is in our long range plan or what was nominated to us. Do we want to amend our documents to accommodate this change, or say, no, we don't. We want to have built what was originally envisioned. So, and this is where we would ask at times for more project update presentations to our technical committee and policy board on the status and design of these projects so that we can catch anything that doesn't have good scope consistency. So, anyways, this has burned us in the past. And I think by putting it in a policy and procedure, It makes everybody more accountable to be paying attention to these things. And then outlining, our process for tracking our monthly tracking of our, funding obligations and use of offset funds. This is something that we already do, but it's clearly a hot topic this year. And fleshing out that procedure in more critical detail, how we're gonna do this. And it's likely gonna result in kind of a new format for our obligation and offset reports that's more inclusive of things that are pending in addition to things that are actually obligated. Again, I'm not gonna go through the whole policy procedure. I'll do a more formal update next, but Olivia, if you'll open up the other PDF right above the packet. Nope. Oh. There's two templates. I'm gonna share, this is on the screen, so there's a couple pages in your packet which reflect this, but so I have put together a new tip template, which I've emailed out to Randy and Don and the other two MPO directors to give me some feedback on this. But this is the new table format. It may look similar to the last one, but it's actually quite a bit different as far as the information on the left-hand column there. So that we know, so we've got a project number, need ID, know who the maintenance authority is or the original project sponsor, you know who the project manager is. We know when the project started and what, and then the year that's anticipated going to construction. And then we have that direct reference back to our MTP to make sure that any project that's in this tip, it has to be in our MTP so that we have that cross-reference there, and then the air quality status. One thing new underneath scope is actually in the regulation, but we haven't been doing a good job of doing this. In addition to like writing out the scope of work and termini, we're supposed to have a length of the project listed in that scope description. And one of the reasons for that is that when we look at our thresholds for administrative modifications and amendments, if you're increasing or decreasing the length of a project by greater than 30%, that triggers an amendment. So we need to know what that number is so that we can, because amendments are triggered by funding changes, but they're also triggered by scope changes, termini or length changes. And so we need to have all that information there, so it's really easy for everybody to determine whether or not this is an administrative modification revision or amendment revision. And again, this table here, federal highway funded tables, will be everything, all of our air quality projects, all the HSA fund projects, all the NHPP projects in the highway system, all of our TAP, transportation alternative projects, are other projects that are Surface Transportation Program funds. So again, all the fund categories that Federal Highways controls. Go ahead and go to the next page. So this is just a blank page there. And then I have a new fiscal constraint demonstration here for each of those fund categories and new fund codes. So I will enter in what is available to our area for each of those fund codes. And then there's formulas in there for program. So it just goes up to the previous table and it grabs everything that's, TAP funding that was sub-allocated to us. It grabs all those, totals them up, throws in that column. And then if you ever see one of the numbers there and a difference turn red with brackets around it, you've busted a fiscal constraint. So we know if we've over-programmed any fund category immediately by entering into one cell and like, oh, we're $500,000 over in this fund category, we've got to figure out a different plan. So then scroll down to the bottom of this page here. Right there at the bottom. And then I have our advanced construction column there so that it shows per year how much advanced construction we're using and when it's getting paid back. And then next page, we'll have totals for our US DOT discretionary grants and congressional directed spending, which are earmarks. So these two categories are interesting. Like the city or the state can apply for a US DOT discretionary grant or an earmark, from our congressional delegation. And if they're awarded funds, those don't necessarily have to be in our MTP or our long range plan, but they have to be in our TIP to be able to move forward. And so these are special cases where, that the member here at the table might be applying for something that they haven't nominated to us before, that we don't necessarily know much about. But for their grant paperwork to be processed, if they're awarded, it's gotta be in this document. So it'll be in that table above and we'll have totals here. Then there's gonna be a match summary for each agency. So each agency will see, I was giving the example of Tim here for City of Fairbank. You'll know each federal fiscal year how much match you're required to pay for your projects in the tip, and there'll be a total on the right for you there. But this is for planning purposes, so that you know what member agencies, what your obligations are gonna be. And then on the very bottom is just a total per year of all the federal highway funding, federal plus match that would be spent on our boundary. And on a given year, it's typically around 50 million is a good number to work with per year. So we'll see if we have any heavy years, light years, things like that. This is really just for informational purposes to see how much money is being spent on the boundary, but we'll be able to project what our construction season is going to look like each year. For contractors, we'll like that table to see how much work might be out on the street. Okay, next page. So now I'm gonna change colors on you, because this is the FTA table. So this is mainly for the railroad and max transit. And these are programs, not really projects. Some are formula funds, some are grant funds. So they're all gonna be mixed together as they kind of currently are. But it will, the one struggle I've had with our FTA table is that using FTA funds for operating versus capital have different match rates. So operating is 50%, capital is 20%. And so I'd like to list those expenditures out separately, so that all the calculations, because right now I'm just getting numbers from the railroad and max transit to insert in the spreadsheet, or I give them the spreadsheet, they fill out their numbers. But this provides a little bit more detail as to what's happening with those formula and grant programs. And then next page, this is one where I kind of struggle with, provided so much of that money is grants, it's kind of hard to demonstrate fiscal constraint. You can demonstrate fiscal constraint for formula programs, but for grant programs, it's difficult because you don't know if they're actually going to be awarded the grant or not. And if they are, then where to go. So I didn't really do a fiscal constraint demonstration here. I just did basically funding totals for each of the FTA fund codes, and then the match summary, so the railroad knows how much match they need per year. For the borough, how much match they need per year. And then other transit service providers there to match. There are these 5310 funds, Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program. And sometimes those services are provided by other transit providers, and they can apply for grants through DOT to grab some of those funds. And so we don't have that situation right now where we have another service provider that has grabbed some of these funds, but there is opportunity there. So I just wanted to put in that placeholder. And then you get the total program funding. So this is a little bit less detailed than the federal highway tables. But anyways, this is how I've set it up. It just kind of came out of my brain that this makes sense to me, and I think it's more useful for you all. But again, I did share this out with Don Galligan and Randy Bailey and the other two MPO directors to kind of get their feedback. Because I know Matt Sue, their MPO is trying to develop a brand new tip. They've never done one before. And I promised I'd send them my new template if they want to consider using it. But all the formulas are in there. It's like at this point, I just need to enter in projects, and all this stuff will all auto calculate. So
Develop an Excel spreadsheets.
just Excel. Yeah, just Excel. Really simple. And it's one tab. It's not separate tabs for each table. It's one tab.
It's really nice.
So just one tab with page first. Anyways, I'm just sharing with you what I'm working on. And I'm hoping to bring forward the kind of pre-final draft of the policy procedure in this new template next month to you all for adoption. And then, yeah. Questions, discussion? Yes, John.
Said next month you're bringing like a template that's complete, and then will we vote on it or something, or are we gonna edit it or give comment?
Yeah, so again, I'm gonna be working with like Don Galligan and Randy Bailey and the other two MPO directors to just, they use these things in their day. Maybe Don doesn't use them every day, but he has a lot of experience with this. to get their feedback on how they would adjust it based on their workflow. So I'm gonna take that feedback in soon and you're gonna see a slightly improved version. But if you, John, as a DOT project manager, if you're looking at this and you see something that you think would be good to change, you can tell me at any time. We'll consider it this month.
Awesome, okay, so you could get rid of the project manager line and that would make room for
Not a chance.
ancillary project sections possibly, cause at least fast through the program and all the spin-offs and stuff, you're gonna have to somewhere in here connect those together, I assume. So, okay,
That one's gonna be a little bit of a challenge, but
okay, thanks.
yeah.
Can you have an example of like the old one in Tampa with like the same project in it, so we're.
Yeah, I can, yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's simple, but yeah, you show the difference. This is the fun part of my phone. I like it.
It's a very nice spreadsheet. Better.
All right. Anything else on that? Okay, seeing none, we don't have any informational items today or other issues that I'm aware of. So we'll just open it up to committee member comments before we consider adjournment. Yeah, that's what we're at. Any committee member comments today? Yeah, Cal?
In the next, probably the next 10 days, to be determined, we're gonna be releasing a draft of our comprehensive plan. We've been working on this for about almost 2 years now. We've had, I forget the final numbers, it was somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 people in the community participate in this, whether it's a survey or open house. So we're gonna release the draft of that. I'll send it out to everyone involved. And then we're gonna be doing kind of a round of community open houses on the 20th, starting on the 20th. So that whole week, where every day we're gonna be elsewhere around the community. North Pole, Esther, Pioneer Park, representing the Chamber of Commerce, a couple of different areas.
Yep. Wonderful.
So
Looking
That's
forward to
it.
seeing it, yep. Tim?
I was just gonna say, thanks for the effort that you guys do every month. It's a lot, good to know.
Yep. I'm sorry the packet was late. Still working on stuff. Still am working on stuff. I had to put my pencil down to get
This
that.
is a lot of work, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So we have sort of the pilot project installation out at Trader Gate and F Street, and we were gonna do the asphalt art, last weekend, but due to rain, and some other permitting stuff. That's not happened. It didn't happen last weekend, but we're scheduled for July 11th. So if you have a little bit of time, come out, put a flower in the roadway, and participate in this really innovative way to address, transportation challenges in the community. So 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it'll be open for anybody that's just kind of wandering instead of doing like a hard sign up situation. So,
Like anyone can paint.
yeah.
Yep. But not within 20
We're
feet of
gonna
the railroad
stencil
track.
them. Yes, they'll be stenciled. We have a color palette. It's very straightforward. So, and it'll be the sum total of phase one. It'll be almost 1,200 square feet of art in the roadway. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay. Any other committee member comments? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn? John? Sorry for picking on you.
Oh, it's all good.
And Tim, hi, John and Tim. And any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned at 1:35.
I